Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. Looking forward to talking about the end of the world. Looking forward to talking about the coming of Jesus again. Does that sound ominous? Wars and pandemics and famines and earthquakes? We're going to talk about all of that today and in the coming days, so listen in.
Welcome to Everyday Truth with Kurt Skelly. We believe the Bible is true and relevant to everyone, everywhere, every day. If today's conversation is a help to you, take a moment to leave a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening. Now, let's join Kurt for today's episode.
Hey, my friends, welcome back to today's podcast. I'm back here in the studio at Fredericksburg, Virginia, and you can probably sense a difference or detect a difference just in the audio quality because I've got some good equipment here. But I do miss giving you live reports from Israel, and I hope you enjoyed the last couple of weeks as we walked through Galilee and Jerusalem and Dubai together. But here we are in Matthew chapter 24. So we're continuing our study of the book of Matthew, and we're in a section, Matthew chapters 24 and 25, that we call the Olivet Discourse. Olivet referring to where Jesus gave this message on the Mount of Olives. And this is a section in the Bible that is rich with eschatology. So eschatology is the study of things future. And Jesus answers some specific questions that his disciples have about the future. Remember, in chapter 23, Jesus has ended his rebuke of the religious leadership. It's Tuesday of the week that he will die, and he has offered himself to Israel. He has offered himself as the Messiah, but they've all rejected him, and now he has rebuked them, and he has lamented, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, this is what you always do. The Father has sent you prophets down through the years, and you've murdered every one of them. You've rejected every one of them. They all spoke of me, and now you will reject me. So this is sad in the sense that Jesus has offered himself, and they've rejected him. And yet there's a note of hope as well. As Jesus said, but it's not over. And even though he will die, that itself is part of God's plan. And he will be buried and rise again. And of course, he will come again. So Matthew chapters 24 and 25 help us to understand some of that, specifically as Jesus is trying to clarify some things to the questioning disciples that are hearing all of this and wondering, have we missed it? Is Jesus really not going to rule and reign? What does the future hold? And Jesus, of course, gives them hope. So Matthew chapter 24, let's look at verse number 1, where Jesus went out and departed from the temple. And his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. So we were just there last week on what we call the Temple Mount. So the Mount is a flat area, huge area, created by making these retaining walls. And the temple is on Temple Mount, but there's so much more to Temple Mount than just the temple. And there are many buildings that are ancillary buildings on the Temple Mount. And they were beautiful. These were newly constructed by Herod, and they were just beautiful. And the disciples wanted to show Jesus these beautiful buildings, no doubt to ooh and ah about the buildings themselves. And yet Jesus has something strange to say to them about these buildings that the disciples are pointing out. And watch what he says in verse number 2. And Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Wow, what a statement. So they're looking at these beautiful buildings. And understand that these buildings aren't buildings like you and I see, made out of wood or small structures. No, these are huge buildings made out of stone. And I mean, they could last for hundreds and thousands of years. Beautiful buildings. And yet Jesus makes a very audacious prediction and says, do you see these buildings? Don't be awed and impressed by them, because stone will not be left upon stone. What a prediction. Now, Jesus is going to predict this in several different ways, but really what Jesus is predicting here is something that did indeed take place very soon after Jesus said this. In fact, in one generation, this prophecy was fulfilled. Now, how? Well, the Jews revolted against Roman domination in 66 AD. And that was a revolt that lasted several years until finally in 70 AD, a general by the name of Titus, who would actually go on to become the Caesar, defeated Jerusalem, defeated Israel. And he systematically, with his engineers, destroyed the temple so that there was not one stone left upon one stone. Now, you can go to Israel today, as we just did, as you know, and if you look in the southwestern part of the Temple Mount, that corner, you can still see today the stones that were cast down from Temple Mount that are still there in a pile that did great damage to that first century road that ran along the Temple Mount. You can still see it, a testimony to what Jesus said right here, that these stones would not be left upon each other. Now, watch how the text goes on. Verse number 3. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives. Okay, so they've moved from Temple Mount. They've crossed the brook Kidron. They're ascending the Mount of Olives. And as they come upon the Mount of Olives, they're sitting there. The disciples came unto him privately, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? So he just talked about the destruction of the temple. Well, when? When's this going to happen? And then, second question, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? So they ask three different questions, don't they? They ask a question about, well, when will the temple be destroyed? And what are the signs of when you will come back? You talked about your coming. And when will the end of this age take place? Give us a sense of timing. So three really specific questions. And if you read Luke's account, the first question about the temple is actually expanded a bit, because it's when will the temple be destroyed, and what will be the signs of the temple destruction. So these questions are very specific, and what we find in Matthew chapters 24 and 25 is that Jesus answers these questions. Not exactly in the same order that they were asked, but he answers the questions nonetheless. So verse number 4, Jesus begins to answer. So look at it, verse number 4. And Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. Hey, don't be misled. I'm up to something. Something is going to happen. I'm going to give the answer, but it's going to be easy to be fooled. So don't allow yourself to be fooled. I'm giving you information. Make sure you put your faith in the word that I'm giving and not in a lot of the clutter and clamor that you're going to see. Look at verse number 5. Here's the way by which many will be deceived. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, I am the Messiah, and shall deceive many. So Jesus said one of the ways by which people will be deceived is through false claims of messiahship. And honestly, down through history, many have come who have claimed to be sent from God, who have claimed to be the Messiah. Isn't it interesting that we've dealt with false messiahs who claim to be who Jesus really was, but we've never had somebody come back and say, I am Muhammad, or I am Confucius, or I am Buddha, or I am. It's interesting. The imposters have always claimed to be Christ. Why? Because there's a spiritual battle. And Satan knows that the authentic representative of God is indeed Jesus. And he's trying to replace him. He's trying to deceive people by claiming to be him. And so Jesus says, I warned you about this. But then in verse number 6, the Bible says, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, wow. I guess that's true. Here we are 2,000 years later. And what has characterized the last 2,000 years when it comes to world history? Well, I'll tell you what's characterized it: war. In fact, if you read that very specific prophecy given by Daniel in Daniel chapter 9, he says that this period of time, this age of the Gentiles, sometimes we call it this church age, is going to be a time characterized by war. So war and rumors of war is nothing new. All you have to do is look at today's headlines and find out that there are wars and rumors of wars. They still lead the headlines of our news outlets today, don't they? But here's what Jesus says in verse number 6. You're going to hear about this, the wars, the rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So that gives us a clue as to which question Jesus is answering. He's answering the question about the end of the age. So obviously Jesus has not returned. We know that. It's been 2,000 years. What have we seen? We've seen wars. We've heard rumors of wars. What's going to happen with Russia and Ukraine? What's happening with Gaza and Israel? What's happening in Sudan? What's happening? And we have these wars and rumors of wars that have characterized these 2,000 years, and yet Jesus has not yet come. The end has not yet come. And that was Jesus' prediction. Now look at verse number 7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. This was a phrase that the rabbis would use, speaking about a great cataclysmic war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places, in various places. In other words, the implication is in places you would never expect for it to take place. These famines and pestilences and pandemics and kingdoms against kingdoms. Watch this. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So interesting. So the literal, if you look at this and study the word use here, this refers to the labor pains of a woman in pregnancy, going through birth pains. Like when she's about to give birth, she goes into labor and has those pains. That's the point. So Jesus says, if it's just war and rumors of war, you'll always deal with that. But when it comes to a place where there is world war, where it's kingdoms against kingdoms and nations allying with nations and pandemics and famines in all of these various places, then you'll know the beginning of the end is taking place. Now, can we resonate with that in looking at our recent history? And I would say irrefutably yes. I mean, look at the 20th century alone. This is the first century where there are wars that are world wars, like World War I. The war to end all wars is what it was called, World War II. We talk about we're right on the brink of World War III. Don't we hear that all the time? Are we dealing with the increase of things like earthquakes? If you look at the Geological Survey information, you'll find out that earthquakes are on a rise, like 40% more just in this last couple of decades. Or we look at things like a worldwide pandemic. I mean, have we seen things like that? The Spanish flu back in the early 1900s, and now we're seeing the COVID and COVID-19, all that we've dealt with. Again, I'm not here to frighten people. I'm not here to make predictions about dates and times. I am here to say that these are predictions that Jesus made that ought to alert us to the beginning of sorrows, to we're getting near the place of delivery, to put it in that pregnancy motif again. Wow. I think we ought to perk up and pay attention, don't you? I think that there's something to this, don't you? And that's what Jesus is saying, is that there are signs of the times, and there are things that ought to cause us to pause. Peter said this, seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought we to be in all holiness and godliness? In other words, thinking about the destruction of things to come and thinking about world disorder and thinking about the coming of Jesus ought to incentivize us to live holy lives. I like what the Apostle Paul said in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, right in the middle. It's at the end of chapter 4, but it's right in the middle of his discussion of Jesus coming and all of that. He says, comfort one another. Comfort one another. So as we think about the end of the world, and we think about the coming of Jesus, and we think about the end of this age, when we think about these things, they ought not to cause believers to be frightened, but it ought to cause us to be hopeful, to know, wow, God is on the move and God's word is true and Jesus is coming again. And there will come a day when he will rule and reign, and there will eventually be a day of new heavens and new earth and new everything. So for the Bible-believing Christian who has hope in Jesus, these events that shake the world and cause great fear among the masses ought to be to us a comfort and a hope and an expectation and a confidence. Why? Because we know the one who's giving the promise, and his name is Jesus. So we've just begun. I'm going to quit there in verse number 8. We're going to come back to the next section here tomorrow. But hope that helps today. I probably have raised more questions that I've answered, but I hope this is a blessing, and we'll see you again next time. God bless you, my friends.